Have you ever stopped to notice how some people reach their 80s with contagious energy, impressive lucidity, and a sparkle in their eyes, while others seem to slowly wither away, as if their vitality was drained long before they crossed that longevity line? What is so different between these two extremes? What separates those who live with autonomy, willingness, and joy from those who face pain, limitations, and an early end? The answer is not in a miracle, nor in magic formulas, but in small daily attitudes, almost invisible actions that, carried out continuously over the years, silently carve each person's destiny. Choices that seem harmless, even banal, but that carry an immense weight on our physical, mental, and emotional health. The most surprising thing, and also the most frightening thing, is that all of this happens without fanfare, without obvious signs. It's a subtle process, a wear and tear that accumulates day after day, until the body and mind finally pick up the tab. And often, it's too late to turn back. In this video, you will discover exactly what are the habits that silently shorten life, why they are so dangerous, and above all, what can you do today to change this course and achieve a long, lucid, and vital old age? Stay with me until the end, because what you'll learn here could be the watershed between just getting old and living fully until the last day. Without further delay, let's begin. If you think that genetics is the only determining factor for a long life, you are wrong. Scientists, doctors, and longevity scholars have been pointing out for decades that it is daily choices that build or destroy vitality in old age. The problem is that many elderly people sink into dangerous routines that sabotage their physical, mental, and emotional health without realizing it. These are subtle but relentless errors. And that's exactly why so many don't make it to age 80. Now imagine you have the chance to change that. Imagine that, by understanding and correcting these actions, you can increase your life expectancy and, most importantly, live with more autonomy and happiness. The 7 attitudes that we will reveal here are responsible for defining whether someone will have a full old age or whether their years will be brutally shortened. And believe me, many of them are committed by practically all elderly people without even realizing the risk they are taking. So pay close attention, because what you discover now could determine your own future. One of the most destructive attitudes that lead many elderly people to not live past 80 is the tendency to isolate themselves from the world. This doesn't happen overnight. At first, it may seem like a harmless choice. Avoid visitors, stop attending social gatherings, spend more time alone at home. However, this silent isolation creates an emotional and psychological abyss that erodes vitality. Science has already proven that constant loneliness is as harmful to health as smoking or obesity. When an elderly person withdraws from human interactions, their mind weakens, their thoughts become more negative, and their own perception of life begins to deteriorate. What was once a refuge from world weariness becomes an invisible prison, a vicious cycle of demotivation and lack of purpose. What makes this situation even more dangerous is the devastating impact that loneliness has on the body. Research shows that older people who live in isolation have a significantly higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, and even cancer. This happens because the absence of social connections causes constant internal stress, leading to the excessive release of hormones such as cortisol, which accelerates aging and compromises the immune system. Furthermore, the lack of interactions drastically reduces cognitive stimulation, making the mind more susceptible to decline. Many elderly people who isolate themselves begin to lose interest in their own health. They neglect their diet, physical activity, and even essential medical treatments. The body and mind enter a state of progressive abandonment that often culminates in accelerated and irreversible aging. Worst of all, the longer an elderly person spends alone, the more difficult it becomes to return to social life. Shame, fear of judgment, and the feeling of no longer belonging to the outside world become invisible barriers that imprison you inside your own home. Time passes, the days become monotonous, and without realizing it, he no longer feels like going out or talking to anyone. What starts as a simple, "I'm not in the mood today," ends up becoming an early death sentence. But there is a way out. Even if loneliness has already set in, there is always time to change. Reconnecting with people, creating new social circles, being in stimulating environments, and finding a new purpose can reverse years of isolation. What seems impossible at first can become the only key to escaping the fate that so many face without even realizing it. Another attitude that drastically reduces the life expectancy of the elderly is the lack of movement. A sedentary lifestyle infiltrates our routine in a sneaky way. First, the person begins to avoid long walks. Then you spend more time sitting or lying down, until your body gets used to a state of inertia that seems comfortable, but is actually destroying your vitality. The problem is that the human body was not made to sit still, and in old age, the lack of physical activity accelerates muscle weakening, compromises blood circulation, and directly affects the functioning of the heart and brain. What many seniors don't realize is that loss of mobility doesn't happen overnight. It is the result of years without physical stimulation, and when the body begins to fail, it is often too late to recover what was lost. The most frightening consequence of a sedentary lifestyle in old age is the exponential increase in the risk of serious illnesses. The heart becomes more fragile, blood pressure soars, bones lose density, making fractures easier, and the metabolism slows down, favoring the accumulation of fat and the development of type 2 diabetes. Furthermore, lack of movement reduces oxygenation of the brain, impairing memory and increasing the risk of dementia. A sedentary elderly person is constantly shortening their own life, even if they do not notice the immediate effects. Over time, a lack of strength and balance makes simple activities, such as getting up from a chair or climbing a step, become dangerous challenges, increasing the risk of falls that can be fatal. Many only realize the seriousness of this error when they are already dependent on third parties for even the most basic tasks. The body responds to what is imposed on it. An elderly person who moves daily maintains autonomy for much longer, has a more resilient heart, stronger muscles, and a more active mind. The secret is not doing strenuous exercise, but maintaining a constant movement routine. Walking, stretching, outdoor activities, and even dancing can make a huge difference. Anyone who waits until they feel pain or weakness to start moving has already lost years of quality of life. Time is relentless, but for those who understand the power of movement, it can become an ally. The choice between aging vitally or slowly wasting away is in each person's hands. And unfortunately, many only realize this when they have already lost the most valuable thing they had, their freedom to come and go. Another attitude that shortens the lives of many elderly people is neglecting their diet. For decades, people have been eating the way they want, without realizing that each food choice is making or destroying their long-term health. When old age arrives, the effects of this carelessness manifest themselves in a brutal way. Hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and chronic inflammations that sap energy and accelerate the body's decline. The problem is that many elderly people maintain outdated eating habits, stuck in a routine of excessive consumption of sugar, salt, and bad fats believing that it doesn't make a difference. But the truth is that food can be the most powerful medicine or the quietest poison. And those who ignore this end up paying the price with fewer years of life. Aging brings drastic changes in metabolism, making the body less efficient at absorbing essential nutrients. What was once just a small overeating becomes a serious problem, as the body is no longer able to repair the damage as easily as before. Furthermore, the natural loss of muscle and bone mass is accelerated when the diet does not provide the right components to maintain the body structure. Many elderly people still make a fatal mistake. They reduce their intake of essential proteins and vitamins, believing they need to eat less, when in fact, they should be focused on eating better. The result of this is loss of strength, lowered immunity, and an increasing vulnerability to diseases that could be avoided with adequate nutrition. The impact of diet on longevity is undeniable. People who maintain a balanced diet, rich in natural foods, antioxidants, and healthy fats, have more energy, less inflammation, and a more active brain, even in old age. Food is not just for satisfying hunger. It defines how the body ages and how much vitality it has left for the years to come. Anyone who insists on maintaining a disorderly diet in old age is accelerating their own deterioration without realizing it. The biggest mistake is believing that it is too late to change. It never is. Small changes, such as reducing the consumption of processed foods, increasing water intake, and investing in nutrient-rich foods, can reverse years of wear and tear and restore the body's ability to fight for its own survival. What you eat today determines whether you will be healthy and lucid at age 80, or whether you will just be counting the days without realizing that the solution was always on your plate. Another attitude that causes many elderly people to not live past 80 is ignoring the importance of mental health. During youth and adulthood, the focus is on work, raising children, and day-to-day responsibilities. But when old age arrives and these obligations diminish, many find themselves lost, without purpose, and without motivation to continue. The human mind needs challenges. It needs new experiences. It needs to be constantly stimulated to stay strong. However, what happens to most elderly people? They fall into a monotonous routine, stop learning new things, avoid changes, and without realizing it, begin to wither away mentally. A lack of intellectual and emotional stimulation accelerates brain degeneration, making them more prone to illnesses such as depression, anxiety, and even dementia. Mental deterioration in old age does not happen all at once. It starts with small memory failures, constant discouragement, difficulty concentrating. Over time, this state of apathy worsens, and the elderly person loses interest in the world around them. Emotional isolation and the lack of clear goals create a destructive cycle where the person becomes convinced that they have lived enough, that there is nothing more to be done. This thought is a silent poison that destroys vitality and hastens the end. The brain, like the muscles, needs to be exercised. Without challenges, it weakens. And when the mind starts to fail, the body follows, making the person vulnerable to a series of problems that could be avoided. But there is a way out. Staying mentally active doesn't just mean reading a book every now and then, or watching a television show. You need to challenge your brain every day, learn new things, engage in activities that require critical thinking and creativity. Studying a new language, playing an instrument, learning manual skills, or playing games that stimulate thinking. All of these help to keep your mind sharp and drastically reduce the risk of cognitive decline. Furthermore, having a purpose in old age is fundamental. People who find new passions, who help others, who stay engaged in society, live longer and better. Anyone who ignores mental health and allows their routine to become empty is, without realizing it, accelerating their own end. The secret to reaching your 80s is not just in your body, but mainly in the way you feed your mind. The fifth thing that prevents many elderly people from reaching the age of 80 is neglect of sleep. During adult life, it is common to sacrifice nights off to work, take care of the family, or solve everyday problems. But as you reach old age, this habit becomes a silent enemy, eroding your health in a devastating way. Many elderly people suffer from insomnia, waking up several times during the night or sleeping only a few hours, thinking that this is part of aging. What few know is that sleep deprivation accelerates brain wear, weakens the immune system, and significantly increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, and even Alzheimer's. Every night of poor sleep is a silent attack on the body, which accumulates irreversible damage over the years. Deep sleep is essential for cellular repair, regulating hormones and maintaining memory and emotional balance. When an elderly person sleeps poorly, the body goes into a state of constant alert, releasing stress hormones such as cortisol, which inflame the organs and weaken the heart. Additionally, lack of adequate sleep interferes with the brain's ability to eliminate toxins, which can accelerate the development of neurodegenerative diseases. Many elderly people complain of constant tiredness, mental confusion, and lack of energy, without realizing that the real problem is not their age, but the quality of their rest, a restful sleep. The body wears out quickly, and each year seems to weigh more than it should. Fixing this problem is not impossible, but it does require changes. Creating a regular sleep routine, avoiding excessive use of screens before bed, reducing caffeine intake at the end of the day, and maintaining a dark and quiet environment are fundamental steps to ensuring deep and restorative rest. Additionally, practicing relaxation before bed, such as meditation or reading, can help prepare the body for quality sleep. Anyone who ignores the importance of rest is shortening their own life without realizing it. And what's worse, when the body finally collects this debt, it may be too late to reverse the damage. Sleeping well is not a luxury. It is a vital necessity for anyone who wants to get through old age healthy and lucid. The sixth thing that prevents many elderly people from reaching the age of 80 is their resistance to accepting changes. During life, it is natural for people to create habits, beliefs, and routines that give them comfort and security. However, time is unforgiving, and as the years pass, everything around changes. Technology advances, social relationships change, the way of seeing the world is renewed. The big problem is that many elderly people refuse to follow these changes and end up becoming prisoners of a past that no longer exists. They reject new ideas, avoid learning different things, and, without realizing it, isolate themselves emotionally and intellectually from the world. This resistance to adaptation not only distances them from people, but also contributes to accelerated mental aging, making old age more lonely and difficult. The human mind was designed to learn and evolve until the last day of life. However, when an elderly person closes himself off from the new, his cognitive capacity begins to deteriorate. The brain needs to be constantly challenged to maintain its functionality, and refusing to accept change impedes this process. Elderly people who insist on living stuck to the same ideas from decades past often suffer more from depression, frustration, and a deep feeling of inadequacy. They feel that they no longer belong in the current world, and instead of adapting, they prefer to move away. This separation not only makes them more vulnerable emotionally, but also affects their physical health, as the mind and body are deeply connected. Those who embrace change and continue learning live longer and better. Adapting to technology, understanding new ways of communicating, trying new hobbies, and opening your mind to other perspectives keeps your brain active and your social life healthy. Age should not be a barrier to personal evolution, but rather an incentive to continue exploring what the world has to offer. Those who accept life's transformations remain relevant, connected, and mentally sharp, while those who resist end up imprisoning themselves in a solitary and limited existence. In the end, the choice between aging curiously or rigidly defines not only the quality of life, but also how many years remain to be lived. The seventh thing that prevents many elderly people from reaching 80 is excessive masturbation. This is a topic that is rarely discussed, but has profound impacts on physical, mental, and emotional health. During youth, the body is more capable of recovering quickly. But as the years go by, vital energy begins to be more limited, and any excess takes a heavy toll. The problem with compulsive masturbation is that it drains essential reserves from the body, overloads the nervous system, and interferes with the production of hormones essential for vitality. Many elderly people do not realize that this excessive habit can result in chronic fatigue, muscle weakness, cognitive difficulties, and even loss of interest in real interactions, which leads to isolation and an accelerated decline in health. In addition to the physical damage, the psychological impact of excessive masturbation in old age is significant. Constant practice releases large amounts of dopamine, the pleasure neurotransmitter. But over time, this can create a cycle of dependence, where the brain begins to demand increasingly intense stimuli to feel satisfaction. This can lead to dissatisfaction with real life, harm self-esteem, and even result in anxiety and depression. Many elderly people who overdo this habit report a feeling of emptiness and an increasing difficulty in connecting emotionally with other people. This emotional and social isolation contributes to more lonely and purposeless aging, weakening both the mind and the body. Balance is essential to maintain vitality and longevity. The human body needs energy to regenerate, and when this energy is constantly drained excessively, recovery becomes more difficult, accelerating aging. Replacing this habit with more enriching activities, such as physical exercise, reading, hobbies, and social interactions, can bring immeasurable benefits to health and well-being. The key to aging vigorously is not in completely avoiding life's pleasures, but in controlling them so they don't become self-destructive. Those who understand this can preserve their strength, their mental clarity, and above all, their longevity. Those who ignore this effect end up feeling the impacts of a body and mind worn out before their time. Therefore, it is essential to be aware of the choices you make daily. Every attitude counts. The way you take care of your mind, your body, your emotions, and your energy determines whether your next years will be lived to the fullest or marked by limitations. Remember, it's never too late to change. Longevity with vitality is not the privilege of a few. It is the direct result of consistent and conscious decisions. If this video helped you in any way, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next content that can transform your life and inspire you to live longer and better. Share with someone you love, who also deserves to know these important truths. It is clear. Leave your like, because this helps this content reach more people who need to hear this message. Cherish your strength, your mental clarity, and your longevity, like the treasures they are. See you next video, with more powerful reflections for a long, conscious, and full life.